Welcome, everybody. This is Netta Pitt. I'm the host of the CISO's Current, a CISO's Connect podcast. I am excited. Today we have Elliott Franklin, the CISO from Fortitude RE, and joining us. And we are going to talk about securing the legacy and innovation. Really, how do we do that from a cybersecurity leadership, and especially in his organization or his sector, the insurance sector. So we're going to get into that and talk through that information. But let me give you a little background on Elliott, and then I'm going to turn it over to him, and he can correct me wherever I was wrong. But hopefully, I wasn't wrong. Elliott Franklin is Chief Information Security Officer at Fortitude RE, where he oversees cybersecurity risk, strategy, risk management, compliance across the dynamic reinsurance platform. With a career spanning multiple sectors, he brings a lot of information across those sectors to bear on his new or his current role. He is known for his ability to translate security priorities into business outcomes and for leading teams that enable innovation while safeguarding institutional trust. So hopefully I did you justice, Elliott, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can say hi to our audience.
Yeah, hello. Happy to be here, and always enjoy giving back any way that I can, and trying to interact, and would love to have questions and just to share. I mean, obviously, there's always things we can share that we did wrong, and so that others can learn from our mistakes, and then certainly collaborate on cool and innovative ways to kind of try new things and always add value as we play this cat and mouse game of security.
It is definitely a cat and mouse game, and sometimes I'm not sure if I'm the cat or the mouse, depending on the day, and what happens. But no, I love that analogy. So, today's episode, we're going to talk about, really balancing, the regulatory rigor, especially in the insurance industry. I think insurance, some of the sectors that are critical infrastructure, healthcare, they have a rigorous regulatory confine that you're in. But it's also about how you meet those rigors, but also enable the business to run and reach their goals
That's
in a
right.
secure manner, right? And so it becomes a very, very you guys are walking a tightrope, right? And we're in those industries, we walk a tightrope between the two. And so I really kind of wanted to have that kind of conversation, get your thoughts on it. So in the insurance reinsurance space, how how that is the dynamics of risk. How do you approach cybersecurity leadership in that complex regulatory environment, right? Because you have risks from all areas. You have risks from the regulators, you have risks from security, you have risk from the business, right? And it all comes together. So can you walk us through how you deal with that and how you kind of lay that out?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So it is interesting because I have worked in, I think, every industry when you're talking about healthcare, higher ed, manufacturing, quick service restaurant, hospitality, and now financial services is kind of the industry we consider ourselves is insurance. And I will say, I thought when I worked in healthcare that it was the most heavily regulated industry, and maybe it's just perspective of when you're there, but I think that financial services is much more. And let me caveat that by saying global financial services. So it may be a little different if you're only dealing in the U.S., but we are a global company, and so certainly that complicates it even further with different regulatory laws that apply in the different territories and the countries that we're in as well. So certainly you can come in and be overwhelmed, but I think it's always been best, to come in and follow an industry recognized framework. We follow the NIST cybersecurity framework. Whether I actually really like it. I don't. There's some things with NIST that I don't like. I think they're too complex or maybe too prescriptive. But the cybersecurity framework and now the 2.0 version that they updated and added in governance, I really really like it. And most boards and leadership teams are familiar with it because they probably come from other companies that have it as well. So if you speak the language of risk from that perspective, you're partnering with your enterprise risk team, your ERM team, And really, that's where it starts from. Is instead of just immediately, which I've been guilty of doing early on, certainly in my career, of wanting to just throw products at, saying we need XYZ products to secure our environment, it's taking a pause, taking a breath, taking a step back and saying, what are our key risks? I know it's not cool and sexy, but what are our cool risks? Do we have a risk register? And let's work with our enterprise team because we've got operational risk and we've got cyber risk at a minimum. And so let's take a step back. Let's look at our risks, and then let's look at what gaps we have. Let's prioritize those in terms of criticality, because you're not going to fix everything. You're not going to fix every risk or mitigate it. But once you have that and you're looking at your highest two or three, then and only then, I think, can you actually go to the tool discussion. And I know, again, super guilty of just wanting to rush to the tools. You go to the conferences, you see the cool tools, you want to buy them. But what risks are those tools actually blocking or mitigating or reducing before you go forward? And then you buy a tool and you use only a half of it or a third of it. And so, a lot of the time we're spending in terms of my team currently, and our strategy is tool reduction. Can we reduce the number of tools that we have? And to your last point about how can we then help, actually bring more ROI, or actually, it's super hard to prove that ROI, but at least accelerate the business, is how can we make the interaction smooth? Can we go to passwordless? Can we, make sure we have SSO, the single sign-on into all of our applications? Can we do as much self-service as we can so that folks aren't having to call the help desk when they have problems, so that they can actually do their job and make more money for the company? There are ways we can use security to help move the business forward, but those aren't sometimes very easy.
Yeah, I mean, they're not very easy. And like you were saying, like everybody, I mean, we're all, I think, guilty of it, is you go to the conferences, you see the new shiny object, and it'll help the team, right?
Absolutely.
But it will help the team. And sometimes you have to go at what expense? Because I have four other tools. And am I now just adding another tool that my team is having to go kind of swivel head? I have to go to that tool, then that tool, then that tool, then that tool to try to figure it out. And I think, what you're saying about the approach, uh, a, a framework that everybody can understand it's the foundation, right? And so CSF um, is the best I find. I know, again, there's a bunch out there, but I find because a lot of people understand it, right?
Yep.
And yes, there's nothing's ever perfect, and we have to work around the edges sometimes on some areas that aren't perfect. But I think laying that foundation, like you were saying, and talking from that point of view, and then as you come into an organization, really building that conversation and that trust with the various parts of the business to understand what their goals are and how they're driving and how it fits into that framework, right? Is super important. And so the thing that ends up happening is, we would all love to be able to come in and have greenfield, right, and start from fresh and make everything perfect across the board, not just in security but across the infrastructure, right?
Right.
We have all this technical debt, right? We've gone down these digital transformations. We've made risk-based decisions to either completely move to a product or not move completely to a product. And there's cyber debt that's related to that, right? Cybersecurity debt. So how are you working with your team and your leadership team to kind of, make legacy coexist with the new tools and work through some of that risk that has piled up from the digital transformation and has really become cybersecurity debt?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I'll say that thankfully, we are only 7 years old as a company, and so we spun off from AIG to create Fortitude RE back. Well, it was back, I think, in 2017. But it's very interesting that we still, even then, and we are pure, we are 100% cloud based. We still do have some, not nearly as much as most, but we certainly still have some technical debt, even in terms of how we form the company very quickly. But I will say the best way that I have dealt with that. I've been at companies that had much more technical debt and where it was much more challenging. And you're right, in terms of, especially when I was in healthcare, you think about, we had robots and things that were, multi-million dollars, and they were working just fine, doing the surgeries, whatever they needed to do. They were producing profits, yet they were running, Windows NT still, and they weren't even supported by anyone. But there are technologies out there that you can still secure that, even though you can't patch it. You can. But before I even go, again, here I am going straight to a product. Is what are the risks? Have you done that true? Yes, you have those legacy servers. You've got that legacy hardware that probably maybe is running outdated operating systems that you can't patch. You've got mainframes, or you've got other systems that maybe you don't have anyone familiar with. I think a lot of that goes back to the risk register, and then also, again, all these things that people don't like to deal with. I'm thinking configuration management database, a CMDB. If you've got that and you're doing the full inventory of, here's the system, here's the owner, here's the criticality, you're doing a business impact analysis to look at that across the board. When you come armed with that kind of information to a strategy meeting, to a budget planning meeting, or an executive, maybe even a board meeting, and you're trying to show the risk, if there is true risk associated with that, just be transparent. Just share that by being on this legacy tech, yes, here's the money we're making, and here's the risks we're facing. At the end of the day, if the board signs off to accept those risks, then your job is done. We are risk managers. We've been very transparent about whether they're high critical, or low, and not just our opinion, but using CVSS or some sort of, again, industry recognized framework to say, here's the risks by us being on this legacy tech. And here are some options and different cost levels to remediate that or secure it or upgrade it. But you're right, and I find a lot of the time it's also those interconnections that you have between those systems. So you talk about the dependencies when you stay on the legacy, and then you've got to have middleware sometimes, in order to do the work. And then that middleware can become a target also. So I think, again, it goes back to that full, when you're talking about like the SANS top 10 and these different lists, inventory, having an inventory, CMDB, those things that, again, security, typically we don't want to talk about that. It's boring, it's paperwork, but again, I say the same thing. I'm a back to the basics person. That's foundational. And I think that helps you with those discussions of moving away from the legacy tech, or at least I can sleep. People say, how can you sleep at night with all these risks you have out there? If I have presented that clearly
Right.
with evidence, I can sleep just fine, because at the end of the day, it's not my decision.
Right. Right. No, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, those are, I think, again, and this is, I think, where our role is changing, right? Or is being seen to change, right? At least from my perspective. So before, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and before, if you were going to be a CISO, you had to be the most technical person, hands down, right? Because it was about the technology, it was about fixing and throwing product at the problem, right? And now it is really a balance, and if not more so, you're a business enabler, right? Because you have to understand the risk across every aspect within your organization. It could be marketing, it could be finance. If you're talking about healthcare, it could be the ER department. It doesn't, you have to know it all, because there's risk coming from all of that, because everybody's using some form of digital transformation within their organization, right? Some digital format, right? And so with that, how do you embrace and talk to the leaders in those different groups, in those different segments within an organization, to help them help you build out like roadmaps and build a process and build, I'm a big process. I was a process engineer before I was anything else. I go to process probably before I go to technology, but like, what's that process that you build out with them so that they can engage and you guys can be engaged in a conversation that's helping both, right? Helps them move to their goals and reach their goals as quickly as possible, and helps you enable and secure what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and we've got a couple of different areas to talk about with that. One is, for forever we've always heard, and you're exactly right in terms of the progression of the CISO. In fact, I've known quite a few CISOs recently that because they have that really good business acumen, have moved on. Some consider it a promotion, some consider it a demotion, but to like a CIO type role,
Right.
because of that, and we always say you have to speak the language of the business, and I'm like, well, it hasn't been until the last couple of years that it's even dawned on me, like, what does that actually mean? That's so cliche. What does that mean? And it hits in exactly what you're talking about. I read a book recently called "Get Out of IT While You Can," and I'm thinking, obviously it's a catchy, tagline, but and what the premise of the book is, get IT out of your head, focus more on, the business. And you're exactly right. And in that book, he gives some questions that, you need to sit down just as to start a conversation, meet with your key business leaders. And I started doing this just probably in the last couple of months, and I kept I wrote down those questions, and I would meet with, the head of, the actuary department, or the head of the, all the different, the finance department, the different departments that we have. And I would ask them, who is our company's biggest competitor? I didn't know that, or, what is our biggest, what is our 30-second elevator pitch in terms of if somebody says, what do we do? Or how do we make money? How do we, what are some of the blockers that, that we have as an industry, not as IT, so just go through these questions. And now I understand what they mean by speak the language of the business. I'm thinking, do I need to go get an MBA? Is that speaking the language of the business? Well, I mean, that can certainly help, but in your company specifically, having these meetings, because when I sit down and I ask them the questions, you should see the look on their eyes. They're shocked, right? They're thinking, you're a security guy. Why do you care? Well, because if I don't know that, I can't protect it. And so you're exactly right. Buying a technology, there's going to be ways around it. There's workarounds. You're exactly right in terms of the processes. What are some of our key, and those are usually the questions asked, what are some of your team's key processes day to day when you come in? If you're doing stock trading or whatever your team does, what are some of those key processes and systems that you use, and what's painful about it? And then when they tell me, oh, let me tell you, here's what's painful, I'm like, okay, let's listen, because if it's painful, they're probably going to try a workaround, or they already have developed a workaround. And so let's fix that. Let's see if we can help accelerate that. And but that, for the longest time, speak the language of the business. What does that mean? It means understanding who your business's competitors are. Who, what's your competitive advantage? What differentiates you from your others? I didn't know that, being in security. I didn't know I needed to know that. But I think to be successful and continue helping them with these, to get their respect, I think you have to.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, again, wherever we can have conversation, I mean, a conversation is an opening to a door, right? The door that opens and you start to have and share, right? When I can come in and have that conversation, and, what I try to do in my first 30, 60 days, in an organization, is understand those different businesses. What are those problems, like you were saying, right? Because again, if they are roadblocks to getting their work done, they're going to find a way around it, right?
Yep.
And that's when you add risk, right? Is when they're finding a way around what you've presented to them to do their job. That's when you find risk. So you have to figure out how it's going to work together. How do you work together? And I think the other challenge is if you don't come in with that conversation, everybody has conflicting goals, right?
Right.
But when you can start to have that conversation, your goals become the same, right? If I can get the actuary department to run and fix the process so that they can run smoother and not have to do a workaround, then they're able to do their job, make more money for the organization, and we're able to do our job, because from a security point of view, because now we've secured and we've created a way for them to do their work.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, one of the key areas with that, and I don't know if you were going to bring it up or not. I can't, talk without saying AI, right? And part of that was, again, it was kind of shocking, I think, to a lot of our business leaders when I embraced that early on. And me and my team, we said, hey, we've checked it out as best we can. We've written a standard policy procedure. We are ready to rock and roll. We are embracing it. We are going to allow it. We're not going to block it in our network, but here's the responsible way we're going to allow it. And sure enough, it kind of blew them out of the water in terms of, they, again, let's partner. They love it, and their teams use it, and it's helping us in the most basic ways. but I think you've got to be proactive in that as well, to try to help out.
Yeah, and I think AI is the rage, right? Everybody's used to be zero trust, and I still think zero trust is a huge thing, and we still
Yes.
need to do it.
Yep.
AI is now the big. I think the part that when we were talking earlier about the legacy and new technology and how they merge together, I think I love and embrace that. Like, yes, we know we have to use it. We know we have to give this technology and this capability to our organizations, right? I would rather have them coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to use this tool, and it has AI, by the way. Can you check it out?" Versus them just swiping their corporate card and saying, "Hey, we got the free, version, and we don't know what AI is in the background, but it's great." Right. And so when you talk through that and you had those conversations and you came from the mindset of yes we can versus no we can't, right? Yes we can, however we have to put some guardrails on, right?
Right.
The When you're talking to your leadership team, your executive leadership team, when you start to have those types of conversations, have you seen that it changes your positioning at the table in those types of conversations? Are you being brought into conversations earlier? Are you seen as, hey, let's go talk to security, we're trying to think about how to do this, let's make sure that they're at the table because they're going to come up with risks, we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with those? Is
Yeah.
that allowing you that kind of change in how you're approaching, yes, with guardrails?
Right.
Is that changing how you're being perceived at the table?
I think so. Again, we are a young company, and but 7 years old and establishing some of those processes and procedures. But it has, I've been at the company a little over 2 years, and I will say for sure. I mean, just being able to be a voice and be a champion, and I think I get to speak at some of the town halls, the all hands meetings that we have, and I try to make it fun and engaging. 5 minutes or less if there's different topics to talk about from a security awareness standpoint or just a visibility standpoint. And I think because of that, members of the different departments, the leadership teams, you're absolutely right. I mean, we do have a more formal project management process now and a change management process, and we're starting to formalize, architecture review and all of those things. But we can't slow things down by doing that by any means. But you're right. Even before, there's examples like maybe wanting to use AI in the call center and different things. And so even before they even engage a vendor, some of them will reach out and we'll set up just a discovery call. They'll reach out, "Hey, we're thinking about this. We wanted to get your thoughts." And because, and you're exactly right, that would have never happened before. The contract would have probably already been signed in the past. And like, "Hey, we need to implement this. Can you check it out?" Well, at that point, it's really too late. You've already signed the contract. We can give you our opinion and we can tell you what we need to do to fix it. But
Right.
it might be a challenge. But I think I'll say there's got to be a relationship. I have a phenomenal relationship with the chief compliance officer and her team. And so, and she's been at the company longer than I have. So if people may go to her with it or myself, and then, and also I'll say with the third party risk team, some people may go to them first. But we all have this little network internally where we'll forward an email and say, "Hey, have you seen this? Did you know this was coming?" And I'm like, "Wow, no, I didn't. Can you please include me in that?" And so that's just partnership. It's not Big Brother. It's not somebody saying,
Right.
"Oh, they shouldn't be doing this." They realize that there's a risk to the company as well. And they also realize we're not going to slow it down. We can't. We'll be irrelevant if that happens. But we at least need to be in the meetings. We need to do a basic risk assessment. We need to look at the SOC 2s and all those different things. Like we would go through our third party risk process and to determine disaster recovery, all of the different areas that we want to look at. And we need to do that very quickly so that they can move, because contracts are signed so quickly now. Otherwise, you're kind of out of the game. It's that's the speed, the pace is so fast.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't. I mean, obviously, AI in everything, whether it's security or everything that we do, the pace is only going to pick up, right? And I think that's that conversation, and that's really, I think, all of us in the CISO role, right, and in security, needing to make that change from the organization of no, and you can't, and we're going to block you, and we're going to stop you, and we're not going to do, to the organization of absolutely, let's have a conversation. I want you to be able to use it, we just need to figure out how do we first that it's supposed to be there, right? Because if
Right.
something shows up, we're thinking, where'd that come from, right? That is that supposed to be there? And then secondly, how do we do it so that we're protecting our data, we're protecting our customers, we're protecting all the things that we need to do, but then allow them to get the benefits of the tools, right? I think the plethora of SaaS applications, the plethora of IoT, the plethora of AI that is flooding our organizations, right? In a positive way,
Right.
right? Is exponentially expanding our landscape and our threat landscape. And it's expanding at a rate that I didn't think, I thought you know, IoT was it was fast. And then you get S and SaaS. And now you put AI on top of it. I'm like, it's a mountain, right? And so we're not going to block and stop everything. We've got to be at those conversations. And I love how you're doing that, and really making those relationships. Last question: what are the three things that none of us have time to listen to all of this episode, even though it's very entertaining and everything, right? But like, what are the meat and potatoes? What are the three things that you want a listener to take away? So if they have no time and they can just cut to the end and they don't want to listen to me yammer on, but they want to listen to you, what are the three things, takeaways that you want listeners to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I would say first, remember exactly what you just shared. First, we are risk managers. We need to, we are there to manage risk and to put guardrails around solutions. We can't slow down the business. I would say second, I strongly encourage you to set up meetings with some of your business leaders across the company and ask them just some questions about the business. Just go to ChatGPT or something and ask them what questions should I ask in terms of who are our competitors, what are our biggest blockers, what are some key processes that you use. But ask, meet with them, and you will be amazed at how, even if they only have 15 minutes, because their time is super valuable as well. So I would say we are risk managers, so partner with risk and understand your risks, understand your business. So get out of IT and think about truly understand your business. And then I would say the third one is going to be the from a morale of your team. We didn't really get into that, but especially if you're dealing with legacy, we talked about it early on. You've got all these tools, you've got all these folks. Make sure you are doing everything you can to um, empower your team, encourage your team, build them up. They're working long hours as well. They're stressed, and so I just can't. Your team is so key and critical, and what can you do to make sure that they are taking care of mental health, that they are have work-life balance as much as possible in security. Those would be my three: is again risk, um, getting to know your business, and then your team.
No, I mean those are great, and those are the three key areas, right? We can't do anything. I mean, we're just individuals. We can't do anything without our team,
Mhm.
right? We can't. We're not going to be in business if we don't understand and can help the team, the business, meet their goals and do it quickly and in a differentiated way, right? Because that's what makes us different. And then that whole it's really about risk. The one thing that I've realized, everybody understands risk,
Yep.
right? It doesn't matter if you're marketing or finance or everybody, like you talk about risk, everybody gets it. Like this
Right.
is the risk too. And so us coming with those types of conversations instead of I need this new shiny object that's never going to land anymore, right? And so I embrace those three. I think that they are spot on. I just wanted to thank you, Elliott, for coming on and sharing your time, because I know we're all super busy, but this has been super informative. I think it's going to be beneficial to the plethora of people that we have that are tuning into these, anywhere from CISOs to CEOs to CIOs to people that are in the industry, right, that are coming up and understanding and wanting to understand more about what we do, the smoke and mirrors that we do as CISOs, right? So thank you very much. And I love to have you back on and talk about, how do you develop, winning teams, and how do you manage and really drive teams that are highly functional, are well positioned in your organization, I would love to have that conversation and bring you back. So hopefully we can do that.
Well, happy to. Very happy to be here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the CISO's Current, a CISO's Connect podcast. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you.